Welcome everybody to our Stingray webinar of the month. We are talking about landscapes in motion with Ron Modra and Don Smith. By way of introduction, Ronald Modra was a Sports Illustrated photographer for 25 years. He has 70 SI covers to his credit, and several of his photographers were selected for Sports Illustrated's 40 Best of All Time and the Century's Best Sports Photos. He is also the two-time winner of the Baseball Hall of Fame's Best Photo of the Year award. He has shot covers for some 200 publications worldwide and contributed to dozens of publications, including Time, Newsweek, People, National Geographic, Playboy, New York Magazine, TV Guide, Philadelphia, and Parade, to name a few. He is also a frequent contributor of fishing, outdoor, and travel photography. His work has appeared in publications and websites including Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, Saltwater Sportsman, Sport Fishing, American Airlines, American Way, Vision Magazine, ESPN.com, and EasyOutdoors.com. He has done commercial work for Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, Reebok, Easton, Dodge, Slim Fast, Columbia Sportswear, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Florida Keys Tourism Council, and NASCAR Images, among others. He has contributed to many books and co-authored several books with the help of his wife. He has also created album and book cover photography for country music stars, including Brad Paisley, Brooks and Dunn, and Travis Tritt. He has shot feature stories and concert photography for performers including Merle Haggard, Kenny Chesney, Keith Urban, Toby Keith, and the Mavericks, among others. And our second presenter of the night is Don Smith. Don Smith began his professional career over 40 years ago as a sports photographer. He then successfully transitioned into the world of fine art landscape photography in 2002. He was a contractor for Sports Illustrated and also worked for 28 years as the co-team photographer for the NHL San Jose Sharks. He now devotes 100% of his time on landscapes and developing and teaching workshops around the world. He is renowned for his work as a stock photographer for Getty Images and as a landscape workshop instructor. He teaches 18 workshops per year. His work's been featured worldwide in a variety of media, and he has had cover images for over 30 books internationally. His work has been displayed in the Getty Museums and around the world. In addition to his stock photography and instructional workshops, Don has also written 3 books: Refined Vision, The Photographer's Guide to the Big Sur Coast, and On the Edge. He has released a 22-chapter video series titled A Simplified Method to Processing, which followed his successful A Simplified Method to Workflow, in which he teaches his innovative approach to post-processing. So with that, guys, if you have anything to add to any of that, jump in there.
Ron, you want to go first?
I didn't know I did all that stuff.
Quite impressive.
I guess I've just been around a long time. No, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Well, I can tell a quick funny story before we get going here on how I met Ron. You heard about the 70 covers. I tend to think it's a higher number than that. Ron, you can correct me. But I do know that one cover that was credited to Ron is what bonded us at the hip years, many moons ago. And it was my one and only cover on Sports Illustrated back when I was trying to crack into working with the magazine. And it was Barry Bonds. And it was a story Ron had been working on for quite a while. And let's just say Barry was less than accommodating to everything Ron was trying to do. He even came out to San Francisco and strobed up the cable car building. Am I right, Ron? And
Right. Yeah.
And I was at a game, not so much to cover Barry Bonds. I was covering the Montreal Expos, a couple of stories. We were working on them. And the starting pitcher got knocked out of the game. And I did a pregame shot with Moises Alou and his dad, Felipe, and who was the manager at the time. So the magazine told me, if the pitcher gets knocked out of the game, by the way, we're working on a story on Barry Bonds, and go ahead and just follow Bonds for the rest of the game. So the magazine cover would have been what I would have considered a throwaway. I actually have the cover here in my office hanging up, and it was just Bonds would come out on deck at the old Candlestick Park, And he would look back up into the stands. He'd kind of cross his legs, lean on his bat. He would look back up over his left shoulder at the stands, and he was looking for his kids. And for some reason, I just snapped a vertical couple of shots of that. I thought nothing of it. And lo and behold, that ended up making the cover because the magazine sort of turned it into a hit piece on Barry as in lieu of something very flattering about him, because not only was Ron stood up a number of times, but I think the writer told me, I think it was Shelley Smith at the time, told me she was stood up at least 15 times, something like that, Ron.
You know what, there were so many people that were stood up by him. It was absolutely remarkable. I mean, it was the story is like legendary. I mean, it's been published in books, magazines about his treatment on the Sports Illustrated. And I actually, after the fact, had gotten a letter from the owner of the Giants, absolutely apologized on the Giants' behalf for the treatment that he gave us. But in the end, Barry didn't care because it was, just I'm Barry Bonds and you're not. Just was the
that was the headline on the magazine. I'm Barry
Yeah.
Bonds, you're not.
Hey, Michelle,
Yeah.
I got one quick technical question. Am I supposed to be seeing all of our faces here?
If you turn on your video, you should. There should be a start video button at the bottom of the
Oh, there we go. Okay,
There you go.
good. I'm new at this.
Okay. All right. And I just want to add, Ron's coming to you tonight from his home in Nashville, and I'm coming to you tonight from my home here in Morro Bay, California, which is a pretty small town. So to kind of orient you, we're on the Central Coast. It's a beautiful area. We're about 20 minutes from Cal Poly University in San Luis Obispo. That's where I'm coming at you from. And it's a very foggy day here. I'm looking out towards Morro Bay, and it's just shrouded in fog. So anyway, there's not a whole lot more I wanted to add. I think, Michelle, you did a great job. I do want to correct, though, that the videos that I had available on the site have come down, but it's for a reason that I can't divulge right now. So we'll just say stay tuned. There might be something exciting coming up about that in the near future, and you can check in on my website. And really, I transitioned over from the world of sports. It wasn't like a sudden transition into landscape. I really started when I first picked up a camera in high school. I grew up around the Monterey Peninsula area. And I'm sorry about this. Let me turn that off. Hopefully we won't get any more messages popping up on my screen there. And I was heavily influenced by the work of a local photographer, Ansel Adams, who you may have heard of. And Ansel grew up in San Francisco, and then, of course, his fame in the Yosemite area. And then his latter years, he lived down on the peninsula on Carmel, in the Carmel Highlands. In fact, we do some workshops there every year, and we go right past his home every year on our Big Sur workshops, and I'm always pointing it out. And his work really, really kind of was what ignited me about getting into the world of landscape. And then Galen Rowell on the color end. Galen was a very famous adventurous photographer and had a gallery in the Berkeley area for a number of years. And then finally moved the gallery up into the Eastern Sierra portion of the California, in a town called Bishop. He reconverted a bank. And I can remember my wife and I and two very young boys at the time, my two sons who are now grown, we went to this gallery of his, and I went in and I was so awestruck by his work and so taken by his work. My wife just leaned over and whispered, and she said, "I'm taking the boys with me, and we're going to go back to Mammoth, to the condo. We're going to give you 3 hours in here." And I could have used 8 hours. That's how taken I was with his work. So really, those were my two huge influences. And I shot, ever since high school, I shot landscape, but I never dreamed of doing it for a living until about 16 years ago. And then I ended up meeting a gentleman named Gary Hart, and we're both Sony Artisans of Imagery members, and we started teaching together. And then about, I don't know, Ron, about 5-6 years ago, I brought you in. You had been asking me for a while to come in, and I think we did Patagonia together. Was our very first workshop that we worked together.
We did,
and yeah,
just to, how I got into the landscape was I had continued to do sports a number of years after I left Sports Illustrated. And I was sort of like in between, what am I going to do now? I'm not a young guy anymore, but I'm not an old guy either. So, what am I going to do? So I started to dabble in a little wildlife photography. I'm a very avid fisherman, and I started to do sword fishing pictures and sailfish and that sort of thing, which was sort of action oriented. And then I actually, through someone at the Miami Herald, I got to work with Guy Harvey, and he was starting a Guy Harvey outpost, fishing and dive destination down in the Galapagos. And they asked me, would I be interested in possibly trying to do some workshops down there? And I always wanted to go to the Galapagos, and so I jumped at it, and I got down there, and now here I am. I'm doing wildlife and I'm doing landscape down there, and I really started to enjoy it, and I started to really transition away from doing sports at all. And to this day, I don't even watch much on television of it. And so then Don, because I had pestered Don a couple of times about this, and over the years he got bombarded by a lot of photographers, wanting to get into the landscape business, because in the workshop, because they actually thought it was easy. It's definitely not as easy as it looks, and I know the amount of hours that Don and Barry put into this thing. So Don just called me one day, and we chatted, and obviously we had known each other through sports, and asked me if I wanted to do this Patagonia thing with him. And I said, yeah. I jumped on it, and not even knowing really what Patagonia was at the time. And so the really kind of strange part of it is, Don and I knew each other, I would say casually. We had never really worked together at all on any level. And here we're on a plane flying to the tip of South America to work with each other for 2 weeks. And it was really remarkable. We hit it off right away. And as far as the landscape, when you see my images and some of the things that we're going to talk about, I learned a lot from Don, and the fact is I owe him a lot on bringing me into this. And so I'm forever indebted to him on this. And so I just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay, well, great. Why don't we get going here? And oops, let me, there we go. What I wanted to start out talking about is some of the concepts we're going to talk about. When we were first approached by Stingray, this was many moons ago. This happened about 8 months ago, I think we were approached, and about doing a webinar. They were laying out the year for the webinar. And of course, being photographers, we got busy with everything else, and and then it came up a couple of weeks ago when we were actually preparing, and I said, so what did we decide we were going to talk about? And it turned out you guys can talk about whatever you want. And we kicked around a lot of different topics, Ron and I, but we thought something that really appealed to both of us was working with these Mor-Slo filters. And we really wanted to delve into that instead of just doing kind of a broad brush filters. We could have done one just on what are our favorite filters for landscape, but we really tried to distill it down so we could get you guys kind of a deep dive on what turned us on about using these Mor-Slo filters. So the slide that's up is telling you some of the, most of the concepts that we're going to delve into tonight, which a big one is going to be pre-visualization. And I think I'm speaking for Ron because I know he and I worked together remotely on Sunday when we were incorporating his work into the show. And it's so much prevalent, not only in working with long exposure, but really any type of landscape photography, because I know I could speak for me, and I know Ron well enough that when we present our final image, when we post-process it and present it, I'm not trying to just duplicate reality. Sometimes I am. And I want to caution that by saying, I don't believe in adding like fake skies or fake moons or any element in the scene that's not there, I'm not going to add it. But I am going to take that raw file and I'm going to work it to its maximum potential to bring out color and tonality that I can possibly bring out in the slide. So you're going to be hearing a lot tonight about pre-visualization, and we will, if you're kind of a little fuzzy on that concept, hang on and we'll explain it as we get into the show. The other ones we want to go through is opportunities to add motion. You know, I see it in my workshops. Ron sees it when we're teaching workshops. We get around water, obviously, and you know, like this shot that's up. This is the beautiful Wanaka willow tree at Lake Wanaka on the South Island in New Zealand. And unfortunately, Ron hasn't been down there yet because I do this workshop with another artisan, Gary Hart, who I mentioned earlier, who started me in this business. And this is one we've been doing for quite a number of years. And the sad thing is you look at that lower branch to the right side, that's just above the water. To me, I look at this tree and I think that's a ballerina. That's the first thing that comes to mind with me. This is just a ballerina. And somebody decided 2-3 years ago that it would be really fun if they came out with a chainsaw when the lake got lower and they hacked that branch and another branch off the tree. And we took a group back there in June this year and we held our breath because I had seen pictures of the tree since they disfigured it, but I hadn't seen it live. And it's still just a gorgeous tree. They did their best to destroy it. And thank goodness they cut the branches, but they didn't cut the heart and soul away from the tree. But that branch will just never grow back. And it's just sad. But the branch just above it is already starting to grow larger. So I'm starting to think that branch may kind of mimic the shape of the bottom branch, and we'll get that beautiful low swinging to the water look to it. The other things we're going to go through is how we think about picking the correct filter. I know in my bag, I carry, on my Mor-Slos, I carry a 5 and a 10, which I find myself using most of the time, but I also carry a 15 and a 20. And that is basically if I'm in a position middle of the day, something along that line, a bright overcast, and I really, really want to mist up the water, I can go to those filters, but I don't go to them a lot, but it is cool to have them in the bag and give yourself just a couple more options. A couple of the other ones touching on the other three, and this is a big one I see in the workshop, and I know Ron experiences this. We will be working in wind and rain, the elements basically. And I talked to a lot of people in the workshop, and hey, you gonna throw on a 5-stop? No, I can't keep that filter dry. And I said, well, I got one on right now, and I can teach you ways that we can work around that. And we're gonna talk about both wind and rain tonight. The next one is doing the math, and I got to share a little funny story. Richard, I don't know if you're in from LA watching this, but if you are, you're going to see a slide come up that I had posted the picture on one of my probably Facebook or Instagram a number of years ago when I did the picture, and you immediately wrote me and you said, what app did you use? And I answered back, my brain. And it's just, I apologize now. I wasn't trying to make fun of you. There are apps, and I'm going to mention the one that I have on my phone. But when I was a young person learning photography back in high school, I would work the math, because back then all we had was manual exposure cameras. And I know, Ron, you had to do all this, and it was just ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed. And I would run these scenarios through my head. Okay, so if I was at 2/50th of a second, and I went to 1,000th, and I was at f8, what do I have to go to compensate to get the same exposure? Or if I want to change off my IXO. And I would just run these, and believe me, guys, I am not a math person at all, but I would run these back and forth scenarios through my head, because in sports photography, and as I've later found out in landscape photography, it helps if you have this ability to be able in your mind to quickly subtract or add very quickly by stop at a time, either changing one of those three variables, shutter, aperture, ISO. And then the last one we're going to talk about is experimentation, which is, I think, very crucial in utilizing these filters on a regular basis. So the way we kind of set up the show, we're going to start with a couple of my pictures, and then we are going to go into a couple of Ron's pictures. So we're bouncing back and forth, kind of 2 images each. We'll give you a little bit of the backstory on the images and go over some of these bullet points. And I think I need to just get out of this screen because, Ron, when you changed to see people talking, it kind of took my view of my screen, or a portion of my screen, away. And
I don't see you on the screen either. I just see your name.
okay, and I may need a little help here, Michelle, because it has taken my play button away here too.
I just changed the setting. Is it any better now?
Well, what's happening is, can you see where I'm hovering the mouse up here?
Yes.
Let me bring this down. There we go. I'll be able to get back into it this way. Okay, so you should be back into full screen, you guys?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So one of the workshops that Ron and I do, in fact, we'll be over there this upcoming October, is in the Scottish Highlands. And this was a picture that was made actually right behind our hotel at sunset. We had been out with the group all day. And please don't ask me to pronounce the name of the mountain. You can read it there. But this is in Glencoe in the Scottish Highlands. And this was on probably to the second to the last evening we had on the workshop. It was a 10 or 11 day workshop. I can't remember. It was quite long. Great workshop. I'm really looking forward now that COVID's over and we can do more of these international workshops to getting back there. And this is where I want to first start talking about pre-visualizing of a scene. When I first heard this term, it came from the great Ansel Adams, and he would always talk about, he would look at a scene, and you got to remember Ansel worked strictly in black and white. And he would have to envision that scene, not only in black and white, but what filters he was using at the time and what they would do to change the tonality of either the foliage, or if you're a fan of Ansel's work, you saw a lot of dark skies. And so that's where really I kind of first learned, way back in my high school days, the term pre-visualization. Now, fast forward to the digital age, and we still use pre-visualization, because when I set up for a scene, obviously in this scene, I don't see, I mean, I may see the clouds moving a little bit, but they're not streaking like you're seeing here. I see the river running, but I don't see it smoothed out like this. I see it in ripples, you know, and white water and breaking over rocks, that type of thing. So I knew I wanted to get the motion in the river and a motion of the clouds, 2 elements. The third element is the foliage. And we were just lucky enough that for some reason, the wind was blowing high and moving the clouds, but it wasn't hitting the foliage. So I wasn't getting any movement in the foliage. And that allows me to allow for the clouds to move, the water to move, but the foliage to stay still. And then I tried a couple of test frames, knowing that sun was going to set down behind those pine trees. And that was my third option. I just, you know, I put number 2, anticipate. And I was just envisioning a sun star. And you can see my exposure down on the bottom. If you go to F16 or F22, you're going to get a nice sun star. And the reason I chose F22 here was because I could have added more time to this, 20 seconds. I could have went to 40 seconds, right? And gone back to, there's that math again, and gone back to F16. But I knew I'd get a sharper sun star through those trees, because I didn't know if it was going to hit a sharp edge of the tree or be a little diffused in a cloud or what. So you could say I was hedging my bets. So one of the things too is, don't be afraid to fail, you guys. You gotta experiment with this stuff. Go out a lot locally where you live and get used to it, because the last point I have here is you got to work fast. I like to work on the edges of the day primarily in my landscape photography. And you've got to be able to do setup, read the scene, read the light, figure out your exposure, anticipate things like the sun, and you got to do it really, really quickly because that light comes and goes very, very, very quickly. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. This one was captured up in Bandon Beach, Oregon on a workshop that Gary Hart and I used to do. We would do a workshop in Bandon area and then on up the coastline of Oregon. And Bandon, if you've never been there, you owe it to yourself to go one time. It is just the most incredible, I think, beach for as far as rock formations out along the coast that I have ever seen. And I live on the southern end of the Big Sur coast now and have photographed the 90-mile stretch of Big Sur, for years and years and years. And as beautiful as the Big Sur coastline is, the collection of sea stacks and rock formation and arches that you find at Bandon Beach is incredible. So this was another night. We were out for a sunset and we had a really, really windy time. I'm going to show you another slide coming up later of one I did before all these clouds kind of moved in and got lit up. And so the scene itself, when I first started shooting it, because I was working with some of my clients and I was getting them going, and I started looking at the back of their cameras, what they were shooting of the scene frozen. And I didn't like it. And I just said, the scene is begging for some movement in those clouds. And it's very windy, so you don't need anything more. You can go to a 5 or 10 stop and you're going to get a lot of dramatic movement when these clouds catch the highlights, or the color rather. So people that had the Mor-Slo filters or another type of ND immediately switched into a 5 or 10, whatever they were going with. I remember putting on a 5-stop on mine and trying one shot when the clouds lit, and it just wasn't enough movement. And I knew I could get more of that painterly look if I went with a 10-stop, and that allowed me, as you can see, 90 seconds at ISO 50. And to me, it just made the shot come together and was exactly what I was looking for, that sort of painterly effect. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Ron for the next two.
All right. This was shot out in Oak Creek Canyon out in Sedona. I had been going out to Sedona for a long time. I actually, my first time I went out there was probably 1972 or 73. I was at that time working for the Milwaukee Brewers. And one of the guys from the Milwaukee Journal had suggested that I go up to Sedona to Red Rock country. So I went up there and I'd seen all the great Red Rock locations. And so going back, but I had never really taken the time to really to photograph them in a landscape, landscape photograph. So when I saw this thing, this location, I immediately thought, you know what, I really want to have that water running, everything, all the red rocks, everything nice and sharp, and the water, the motion just coming in, leading right out of the picture. And so this is one that I had envisioned, and it's, again, we're going to beat this pre-visualization thing right tonight. So I really had wanted to do this picture, and it came out remarkably as I wanted it. And again, I couldn't have done it without the 10-stop Mor-Slo filters, so Mor-Slo filters. So, and again, what I did was I experimented with a number of different exposures. The 30 seconds for me seems to work best on a lot of the water images that I do. I'm not saying that it's the end all be all, but it's the one that seems to work for me. But everyone should try to come up with a time that works for them, and with the kind of lighting conditions that you're working with. One of the things for me, only being a landscape photographer, and I use that term pretty loosely, for the last 5 years is that I came into the game with really no preconceived notions of what, landscape photography was probably all about. I just kind of, went with a vision that I kind of liked and I wanted to present. And so that's another thing to kind of emphasize when you go into a situation. Just kind of remember that these are your photographs, and you should try to make the image the way you like it, not the way necessarily anyone else does, but the way you do it. And that's where experimentation really comes into play. And so you work with different exposures, and you'll come up with something that I think you'll always like. And once you get it on the computer and start to process it, you're going to be really quite pleased with what you're doing.
So we have a couple of questions. That 10-stop filter doesn't add the heavy vignette, does it? Is that done in post on this shot?
Yes. They call me heavy hands sometimes in my post, because I have a tendency to occasionally over vignette some of my shots. And I kind of do that. I grew up in the newspaper business, and we always were messing around with dodging and burning and that sort of thing. And I kind of got into it, back then. And I always like to sort of bring the emphasis into the center of the picture, the most important thing. So I've been trying to lay off a little bit more with not quite vignetting so much, but on this particular one, I might have gone a tad overboard, but it worked for me.
Right. And then someone asked, what's the difference between an ND filter and a Mor-Slo filter? Do you want to take that, or should I?
Don?
In my mind, there's no difference, but go ahead, Michelle.
So what I was going to say is an ND filter is basically a category of filter, and a Mor-Slo filter is something specific within that category. I'm going to pop a link into the chat to our ND filter category, and you'll see the Mor-Slo in there and some of the other ND options, and you can kind of compare them and see how they differ there.
Yeah. Okay, you ready for the next slide? Ron?
Yeah, let's keep
I
going.
Okay.
Okay, another one from Scotland, the Cullen Hills. Again, this was probably shot on the same day that Don shot the one that you saw previously. And again, this is one where weather played an important factor. And we got out there, it was drizzling pretty hard, but the fact is the mood was just over the top. We just had this incredible, sky, the clouds were moving and the water was coming through. And so again, I just thought that, this is one where I did not want to freeze the water. I wanted to use my 10-stop. And so I got down there, and as you can see, I was using 30 seconds on the ISO 64. And this was a real challenge. And so, and Don will echo this, I've used probably every sort of lens hood that's ever been manufactured. And I never have gotten one that I've really liked, and ultimately trash bags sometimes work the best. And so what I had is I had a hooded parka on, and so what I did is I pulled the hooded parka over my head and then over the top of the lens and tried not to get any vignetting in there. And so I was able to, not everyone, because I shot probably, I'm going to say 6 or 7 exposures on this. And so a lot of them had a lot of watermarks, a lot of raindrops, on the filter, but I was able to get a couple of frames that I liked without the water droplets on there. And so, you got to improvise on a lot of locations. You've got to overcome and adapt, especially when you're on a place like Scotland where rain is always a factor, and again, this is another one where, you get in there and you experiment a little bit and come up with a mood that you like. And again, the 10-stop filter for me, it just worked on this image.
Yeah, I want to echo what Ron's saying. It, yeah, you can go on Amazon, you guys, and there's so many different camera covers, lens covers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're old school guys. I can remember being out on the sidelines of NFL football games. we all got black garbage bags with gaffer tape taped around those
Absolutely.
600, 400 millimeter lenses. And our shorter glass, we have baggies wrapped around them.
Yeah,
And a bunch of lens cloths in our pockets. And it's the hardest thing, especially in landscape and fine art, because you're blowing some of these images up very large, to get a raindrop cloned out in Photoshop. To me, even as good as content aware fill is, it's one of the toughest things that software, or any software really, can struggle with, is a rain droplet. So I'll wipe in a circular motion, and the minute I'm pulling that away, I'm clicking the shutter. I mean, literally, it's just cleared the lens that I'm clicking before any other water has had a chance to get on it. So it's like anything, it's practice. And like Ron said, when you travel internationally and you go to a lot of these places we go to, it's different type of weather. And when you go up to the Scottish Highlands, forget about sunny days. It just doesn't happen up there. It's a lot of rain and a lot of drizzle, but that's what makes these moody, beautiful images come to life. So,
and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get out in the bad weather. I mean, I think sometimes that the worst weather on some of these landscapes makes the best images.
I do too. Yeah, Gary Hart used to always have a saying, and I've stolen it from him. When it's Chamber of Commerce weather, sunny blue sky, that's when the real photographers are staying inside. When the tourists are running inside because the bad weather's coming, that's when a good photographer should be running outside. So acclimate yourself to learning to work under adverse conditions, and your pictures and the mood and the feel of your pictures, I believe, will go up exponentially. And we love working around the edges of the day. That's the same thing also. So for example, this image here, this was captured up the coastline. This is kind of close to Santa Cruz, California, a little south of Santa Cruz, place called Sea Cliff State Beach. I know somebody from Santa Cruz is on this webinar tonight, so you're recognizing these areas. This was an old concrete boat at the end of this pier that when I was a child, my dad and I used to fish off of. You used to be able to come off that pier and actually walk onto the boat. It was a decommissioned, and I'm hoping I'm not getting this wrong, a World War II decommissioned boat. The Navy actually had some all concrete boats made. And when the war ended, they brought this boat up from down south and brought it up the coast, and they parked it at the end of this pier. And you could actually walk onto this boat. I remember there was like a little bait shop, probably a little area you could buy snacks and stuff, and we fished off this boat. So this boat has always held an emotional tie to me. And what they're telling me now is they're just going to allow the ocean to take it over the years as we get the bad weather in the winter and the waves crash over it. And eventually it won't be there anymore. But when I went out there this night, I had no preconceived ideas of what I was going to be working on. This was during the winter, probably a December, I think. So, the sun's setting relatively early, probably a little bit before 5 p.m. And I was over at the beach at 4 and playing with some stuff. And then I could see the clouds moving in. And I saw on the horizon, if you look past the boat, obviously, there was just a little bit of a faint glow of the sunset. But right where I was, the clouds opened up and it started to rain. And here I'm all set. I have my 5-stop Mor-Slo. I was envisioning this shot. The only unknown to me were how are all these birds, these gulls and pelicans that were sitting up on the railing, how are they going to turn out during this, what do I have, a 7.5 minute exposure?
That's one of the questions in the chat, actually. How did you do that?
How did I do what?
How did you get those birds to stand still for 7.5 minutes?
I brought a lot of birdseed and bribed them. No, there's no other way. They stood there and they were very, very, very still. Look kind of right in the middle of where the birds are, to the right of the pelican. You come up that line and you see a couple that almost look like ghosts. So that was just them moving during a 7.5 minute exposure. I learned this lesson. I saw a picture once. shot in the middle of the day in Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, no people on the sidewalk. And this is when I was young and didn't know anything about neutral densities, filters, or anything. And I remember reading about the picture and realizing it was about a 15-minute exposure. And the street was just full of people, but everybody was moving. And as long as they're moving, they're blurring themselves out of the shot. So that's how that happened with the birds. And so what I did is, I mentioned earlier, if I didn't, I will say I carry an umbrella with me. And if you guys want to jot this down, I found a really good one you can get on Amazon, and it's called a Repel, R-E-P-E-L. And it's made really for photographers, and it's very, very sturdy to the wind. And you guys know that sometimes you're out and there's a lot of wind. Fortunately, this night there wasn't, because it's tough to work in wind. That's when your lens and your filter are getting, the water droplets. That's hard to get them to stay off. So the goal with an umbrella is not to keep me dry. The goal is to keep that lens dry. So I knew working the math, and this was the one I think my friend called me on. How'd you figure that out? Well, just in my mind. I just ran this in my mind, and I knew I wanted to be over 5 minutes, but less than 10 minutes. And that just came from a lot of experimentation. And I just worked it out. I think I actually cut the exposure off at 7.5. I knew I was close enough. I think I was kind of gunning for an 8-minute, but really when you're working up on that length of distances, you might be a third of a stop underexposed is all. So I do also pack a lightweight rain suit in my bag, and that stays. I have 2 bags, and I've got a suit in each bag. You could just go to like a outdoor gear place like an REI or something and get the very lightweight ones, and just leave them in your bag. This squall came in so fast on me, I didn't even have time to put that on. So I was getting nice and wet. But the key to me was that my lens wasn't getting wet, and my camera, but more importantly, the Mor-Slo filter wasn't getting wet, right? Because that's my first line of defense where the light has to pass through. And because it was raining, you guys look at this, you go, well, I don't see any drops on the water, and I don't see any rain droplets. No, it blurred itself out. So it's kind of cool. If it wasn't for that warm splash of light that came up behind the boat, I would have probably have packed my gear and come home, because it was just, or I would have maybe gone just tighter on the pier itself. I don't know, but that was just that little spark that caught my eye and had me stop and photograph that.
So on that shot, that last line, why 5 stops in 7 minutes? Why not a 10 stop and a shorter exposure?
Because you're trying to work this stuff out fast. And remember, I said I did want to go between 5 and 10 minutes based on experience. And I had been experimenting before the rain started. And, I could have gone to a 10 and a shorter, but I just didn't think I was going to I didn't like the motion I was getting out of it, because it was cutting that down. I would have to do the math here, but it was going to cut it down, 5 more stops. So that's just, and a lot of times, I'm going to be honest with you guys, a lot of times you think we're working everything through 100%. And a lot of times we're just kind of like guessing, we're just going through experience and going, I think this is going to work based on past experience, and I hope it does work. And the light's changing so quickly, because this was right, probably the sun was just setting out there. And it was just had these thin clouds in front of it. And that's where I was catching that warm glow. And so, this was a number of years ago, so I wouldn't be able to answer your question exactly, but it is really easy to play Monday morning quarterback on these things. And believe me, there's times I come home and I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, you dummy, you should have used this filter, or you should have used this exposure. But to me, that's all fun of it. That's all the fun of it. Don't beat yourself up. You got to experiment quite a bit. So let's take you back here to Bandon Beach again. This was earlier than the shot I just showed you. This is when the sun was still out, before any of those clouds came in. You would look at this and go, my gosh, it's a clear blue sky day. But that's how the fog and the clouds can if you live anywhere near an ocean, it's just phenomenal how quick they can form. Where I'm sitting looking at this computer, I'm looking out over the bay of Morro Bay and the ocean. And I can be looking out there and it's clear blue sky. And 10 minutes later, I will look out there and a wall of fog will have formed out of nowhere. And it's just the more I live around the beach, the more I'm just blown away by how quick stuff can happen. So the reason I wanted to put this one in, I put, if you see under windy weather up there, don't fight the elements, work with them. This took me years to learn this. I always used to try to, oh, well, I got to go 1/1000th of a second. I got to go 1/2000th of a second shooting flowers. Then I finally figured out one day, you know what, this is art. Maybe just allow your subjects or a portion of your elements to blow and streak. So you're looking at this image and you're going, well, what's really blowing other than I see some movement in the water? Well, that sand you're looking at was in reality ripples. It was sand ripples. But I was guessing the wind was blowing probably between 30 to 35 mile an hour. We would have gusts even higher than that. And I just sort of said, you know, you play that what if game. What if I just did a long exposure? And this one was 9 seconds. And I was, you know, bracketing around on the exposures. What would it look like? Could I smooth that sand out? I knew that that branch wasn't going to go anywhere. I knew the water would move a little bit, and I just wanted to see what it would do to the sand. And sure enough, it just made the sand just look like it was clean, pure sand, when reality, to my eye, it didn't look like that at all. So the wind to help me on that, I just took my tripod, or excuse me, my camera bag, and I hooked it around my tripod to weight it down. I was actually kneeling down on this shot, had my tripod fairly low, and I just try, when I'm trying to do this stuff, I'm still trying to think composition. So one of the things that I always say, if you find a background, challenge yourself to find a foreground. You find a foreground, challenge yourself to find the background. Even if you're just doing simple smartphone photography, that's a good little mantra to tuck away in the back of your mind. And obviously we have these beautiful sea stacks out at Bandon. And so the challenge was just find something simple in the landscape, something natural, which was on the beach. We had this driftwood and stuff that had washed up. So that's kind of all it took, and to put the elements together. So, okay. Oh, looks like I got out of order here, Ron. I'm going to go for a third in a row here.
Don't worry about it. You're doing great.
Okay. So talking on one of our other concepts, this is, again, we're going to go back to South Island of New Zealand, Lake Wanaka and the Wanaka Willow here. Opportunities for motion. When we took the group out to shoot on this evening, and really our hotel, if you look at those trees over there to the left, our hotel is just literally right behind those trees. And so we can walk out, and in about 5-7 minutes, we're standing right where I'm standing here to shoot this. And we shoot it both as a sunrise and a sunset shot because it looks so different on both ends of the day. So to me, I was reading the light, the sun had already set, and overall the lake and the clouds just had this soft feel. Everything was soft. You even have mist starting to come up there in the background, up by the hills, up by the Alps. And this is in June, so you got to remember that's we're in the Southern Hemisphere, so that's like their December down there. We're kind of almost, this is late June, so it'd almost be like our Christmas here in the Northern Hemisphere. And it was a very chilly, cold night. I remember that. And I just said, you know what? I have to put the Mor-Slo on there because I want movement to accentuate this feeling of softness that I'm feeling out here. And it just took me a couple of clicks of, you know, to see the scene frozen down where I go, that's not moving me. And I always try to teach in my workshops that if something is not moving you as the photographer, how are you going to expect that image to move anybody else? So you got to get that image to move you, to kind of light that fire inside of you. We had everything present. We had the beautiful sky, the mist, the lake, Those trees weren't moving because it was a calm evening. So I put a 5-stop on there and a 3-minute exposure. And I almost think this might have been the time I went over on one of these New Zealand trips and I actually forgot my filter bag at home. And this might have been the one where, thank goodness, I had a client who had a couple of 5-stop Mor-Slos in their bag. And they either had 2 or they had a 5 and a 10, and they were using the 10 and they lent me it. And it just really saved the day. A mistake I've never made since, but okay. And looks like, Ron, we're back to you now.
Again, this was taken in the Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. And as you drive around the Smokies, you're going to see a lot of these little, waterfalls and these little creek coming through with the rocks and everything. And again, I look at these, and when I see this kind of water flowing, the Mor-Slo filters, it just jumps out that this needs to have a bit of a long exposure. And I got my composition, and I wanted the water to come right off the end of the image. And this was like fall when the leaves are kind of blowing around, and there was still a lot of nice moss on the rocks. And so I was able to make this exposure, again, 30 seconds. Now, a lot of people have asked me, and again, I don't really have a great answer for this, but I was using ISO 400 and F5 at 30 seconds, and I got still had some great depth of field with the 24 to 105. So sometimes I just don't go all the way down to F11. I don't really adhere to any really hard, fast rules on some of this landscape imagery. So I just experiment, and I look I go by feel a lot of times, how the scene feels to me, and like Don was saying, if it's not singing to you, maybe it's just not worth shooting. And so I look at these, and then I try to make a composition in my mind. I go in, and again, pre-visualization. In sports, we don't really have that luxury because we're at the mercy of the action of whatever game we're photographing, whether hockey or baseball or football or whatever. Every kind of image that we photograph is dictated by the action. When you go on the landscape, you can dictate what kind of photograph you want to make. And again, what I try to do is, with my pre-visualization, I try to crop in the camera. I do not like to crop in post-processing. I like to fill my frame with the image that I want to edit. You're not going to make a picture if you try to take a square out of the middle of one of your frames. I think you're going to blow that up to 16 by 20. I got news for you, that's just not going to happen. So one of the things that I emphasize, and Don does too, is crop in the camera. Look for your composition. This is one of the hardest things that I see young photographers do, is they have a really, really difficult time with composition a lot of times. And so that's why, I preach, don't get back home and put it on your computer and say, oh boy, there's my image right dead set in the middle, and you're going to try to pull that out of there. It doesn't work that way. And so again, look, compose, and then shoot. It's a fairly easy process. And so this was one that I just stopped by the side of the road. I saw this little brook, and I made this kind of fall picture. So that's about all I got on this one.
Okay. And this is another one of yours, Ron?
Yeah, this was one from the Smokies. This was one where I had thought about this picture for a day or two. I'd been up there, and I wanted to get the early morning light. This is an old grist mill that's in near Cherokee, North Carolina, and Smokies, and it's actually still a working grist mill. They still grind some corn and that sort of stuff there. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get that early morning backlight with a little flare, and I wanted to get the water running down towards the grist mill with the 10 stop. And I got out there, and once again, all the elements, again, other people might have some other opinions, but for me, all the elements came together for this picture. The nice backlight, a little flare, and the water running down in towards the grist mill. And again, this is things when you're traveling and you're going about some of these things, and you have an opportunity to go to a location once or twice or even more, you know, look around, think about the time of day that you're going to be there. And sometimes you might say, oh, hey, look, this is going to be a really, really great morning shot. You know, I'm going to come back tomorrow at daybreak, and I think this is going to work. And this is what I did. I got there early, you know, and I was able to come up with the image that I liked before a lot of the tourists, you know, got involved. So again, the Mor-Slo 30 seconds, you know, I used ISO 320 and F9. And so I came out with an image that I like. And again, you know, think about what you're doing. This was full frame. I did no cropping on this. So again, you know, think about what you're doing when you get out to some of these locations, and you're going to come away with some images that you're really, really happy with. And you know, working with water and working with these 5 and 10 stop Stingray filters, you're just going to be really, really pleased. I guarantee it.
I think I want to add, Ron, and you made a really, really good point. And you know this, over the 5 years we've been working together, 5 or 6 years now, I always, and I know Ron does, when we put in a new workshop, we always do our best to go out on the exact month that we plan on offering that workshop. So it all starts a year, sometimes 2 years prior to us doing the workshop. And we look for locations, and then we show up at the actual time we plan to take our participants there. We'll look at a scene like this and go, is this a morning shot? Is this shot better suited for later in the day, sunset, whatever? And I think that's really important when you guys are out and you're going to new spots, if you have that time. And I know a lot of times it's not easy for you because you're traveling with family or friends or whatever. Spend that time during the day when you don't have, you know, when the light's not the best, looking at your shot, or at least plotting it on the computer. You can use Google Earth, you know, Photographer's Ephemeris. There's a lot of programs you can use, and think about where your light is going to be. You only have really one big light up in the sky, but you know what we can't control is, like, when I first saw this picture, I really loved this picture, and I asked Ron, I said, was that haze actually there? And he says, oh yeah, it's exactly what it was doing. And chances are really good, I don't know, Ron, because I've never been there, that if you would have went back in the afternoon with the temperature difference, you're not going to get that haze, as opposed to the chance of getting it in the morning time. So think about all of these things when you're planning for your images. Okay, now we'll get a little you know, crazy on you here. This is I put pre-visualization. This image literally came to me in a dream. My wife laughs at me and says, you've been doing this so long now, you're actually dreaming about pictures. This is a place that a lot of people call Pfeiffer Arch. It's on the Big Sur coast, up kind of on the northern side, probably about 20, it's about 20 miles south of the Carmel area. And during November, well, kind of from mid-November to mid-January, the sun will align with the opening of the arch here. And the locals, we refer to this arch as Keystone Arch. That's the actual name of the arch, but it's on Pfeiffer Beach. I have shot, I think I put in my notes here, at least 60 times. I've led a bunch of groups down to this. This is one of these shots that people come now really from all over the world to try to get this picture. You know, another one is up in Yosemite, not the firefall, and oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the fall up there that gets lit in February if the conditions are right. So it's the same thing here. And I had shot this from every conceivable angle I could think of. There's even a big sand dune up to the back end of me that you can climb up on and shoot down. And I almost threw a picture in of that because I was out there one evening shooting, and there had to be 20 photographers. So I used like a 15 stop Mor-Slo, and I was able to blur, or the photographers were able to blur themselves out of the scene. The problem was what I forgot about, the photographers might be moving around, but their tripods aren't moving around. So those tripods were in there and I had to go in and pretty much take out about 20 tripods. But things you can accomplish using these filters. But this came to me, actually, this is shot now. This was two separate frames and then composited in Photoshop. And if I do this, anytime I do a composite, I will tell people that I am doing this, that this wasn't the way, because I could probably have done this and gotten it all in one shot. But what was happening is the shaft of light was hard to predict. So the water has to go through the opening of the arch there, and then the mist goes, and then it's hit by the backlit by the sun and refracting the light. You get that gorgeous orange shaft of light coming through. So the idea that came to me is I really wanted a misty look to the surf in the rocks there. And to accomplish that, it took, you can see, a 2-minute exposure. And so I showed up early and I played around with this. This is a backlit arch, so the sun obviously is setting behind it. And to accomplish that, I needed a 5-stop Mor-Slo. And it was really as simple as that. So one frame of the water blurring, and then one frame of the shaft of light and the arch itself, and then masking the two frames together into Photoshop. And I thought what was really cool, if you follow the shaft of light all the way to the far right edge of the image and you see it hitting the rocks, that I didn't go back in and do any Photoshop wizardry there. That just, because the shaft kept lining up during the 2-minute exposure, it painted the rocks for me, which I thought was just really, really cool that it did it. That was sort of, some little thing you don't think about when you're out there shooting, but when you actually see it in post-processing, you go, yes, that just kind of sells the picture for me. That's what makes it really work for me. So here's one, we'll take you back up to the Scottish Highlands now. This is one called Stalker Castle. This is one we do when we're up in the Glencoe area, but we have to, this is about, I don't know, Ron, 45 minute little trip we take down here to shoot sunset. Beautiful castle out there, and you never know what kind of conditions you're going to get. And we had this great sky with enough holes in it where we knew we were going to get the sun setting behind there, and we were going to get some color reflecting in the water. And again, that's just, I listed this under doing the math, but this could be listed under pre-visualization, could be listed under opportunities, any number of the concepts we're talking about tonight. So I wanted to just go through this really quickly. Your cameras are, they'll allow you to go at 30 seconds. Now, because I'm with Sony, I've had a chance to talk to some of our engineers, and I'm going to be talking to them again here very shortly. And I want to bring up that, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I want to bring up that because we're in the realm of mirrorless, couldn't you guys give us 1-minute exposures, 2-minute exposure, 5-minute exposures? So we wouldn't have to be on a locking cable release all the time. And I've run that through on a couple of engineers, and they kind of like, yeah, that could be done probably. So I plan to bring it up here when we're going to have a meeting here shortly and see if it's something that I can possibly push Sony. And there may be some technical reasons where they're going to tell me, no, that won't happen because of this, this, or this. But I'm certainly planning on talking about it and bringing it up. But until then, we have to do it. And like I said, you can either do the math in your head. So every time you're changing, we only have 3 variables, right? Shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So anytime we're doubling or halving one, we got to give back. We got to double and halve the other to keep the exposure running correctly. So you can either do that math in your head if you're really good, and I'm not good with math. So if I can do it, I know you guys can all do it. There are calculators, little apps that you can put on your phone. One I do have on my phone is called Long Exposure. But I tell you, this light comes and goes so quickly when you're out there. If you're fumbling around on your phone, trying to figure out an exposure, where did that app go? I got to swipe through 5 pages and try to find where I stuck that app. And then, oh gosh, I haven't used it for a while. How do I use this thing? That light's going to go away on you. That light is very, very fleeting. So if you can do this math back and forth, halving and double of the three variables I'm talking about, you're gonna train your mind to do this when you're on location, and you can do it very, very quickly. And you can see I wanted a 30-second exposure. Like Ron said, 30 seconds seems to work really good for a lot of these images we do of water. In fact, personally, I don't notice a whole lot of difference between 30 seconds to 2-minute range. I really don't. It seems to all kind of look very, very similar to me. So 30 seconds is good a lot of times. So how can I work that math to get my exposure when I see this light happening and do it very quick? Train your mind to do that math, and it'll really, really help you out. Okay, Ron, we'll throw it back over to you.
I am ready. This is one I just shot recently. I just was over in Ireland for a while, and again, I was my wife and I were just driving along, and we came upon this scene with the incredible green grass leading up. That's an old, broken down, what's left of a castle that was up there. And again, this is one where I could have gone without a filter, but I saw this water, saw a little bit of the movement, and I went with the 5-stop on this just to get a little motion in the water and a little bit in the clouds, not much. But I just wanted a slight movement in this. I tried the 10-stop, and it was a little too much for me, and so I dropped down to the 5, and it worked a lot better. And so again, this is it was a little bit of a misty day, going with what the elements were. I mean, this is I'm finding in landscape photography, and the longer that I'm doing it and the more that I'm learning, is the fact is that, wow, you can just, when the elements are right there in front of you. And again, this goes with what we were talking about, Don and I, about opportunity. Make the most out of the opportunity that's right in front of you. I don't really think about, oh, I wish this was different. I wish that was different. Oh, if only the sun was hitting the side of that rock, or, the water was moving more. I don't really dwell on those kind of things. I kind of look at it at a scene and say, what can I do with this? How can I like this? I like this location. How can I make this work? And so again, it's trying to visualize something in your mind, trying to work with, again, I'm coming back to this pre-visualization thing, and I'm also coming back to the fact when I see water in a picture that I want to get that motion in there. But I don't think I can emphasize enough, and Don has been doing this too. I don't think we can really state enough about when you're looking at a scene. Before you start shooting, think about what you're trying to do and what you think that image is going to look like. And again, look for something that you can fill the frame with. So when you get home and you're not trying to, I'm not even sure if I'm going to show this, but when you're trying to take the top part of that image there and blow that into something that it's just not going to work. So again, it's like, visualize a scene, try to figure out what filter you might need on the image to make it a little bit stronger, and then I think again, I said this on the last little segment. You're going to come home with some pleasing images, and I think that you're going to learn a lot through this pre-visualization and experimenting a little bit with your exposure. And so again, I came back, and when I was looking at this, I was very pleased with how it came out, and so
I think you can, if I can mention one thing, Ron, when we were working on putting this together this past weekend, I asked you why you switched off the 10-stop, and we talked about that mist that's sitting above, up there. And I think when you said you went to a faster, longer shutter, like a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, 4 minutes, it kind of just smoothed itself right out. There was no texture in that mist, and I loved how he was able to hold the texture in that mist.
Yeah, what it does is, and again, a lot of times when I'm looking at a scene, I'm looking at the mood, and again, and again, some of this will be done in post-processing, is how you create a mood in your images. And so that's one of the things that I look for and try to convey when I'm shooting something like this is, what kind of a mood can this image have? And again, working in Ireland, working in Scotland, working in Norway, is factors. You have to work with the elements. I mean, these are things where you have to overcome and adapt at almost every location that you go to, because the weather is just so unpredictable. And so, I don't want people to feel that if it's not a bright blue sky, sunny day, you shouldn't go out there in a rain, fog, mist situation. I guarantee you, Don said this a little while ago, you're more than likely going to come away with your best images when the weather's not the best. And that's how, that's how we both kind of look at these things. And when we're on the workshops, we try to convey that to the people that are going with us. So again, don't be afraid to get out there in crappy weather and experiment a little bit. You're going to be surprised what you come home with.
Totally agree. Okay, this is another one.
Okay, this is one where Don and I do the Big Sur workshop, and it's Matterhorn Rock. I had never been there before, and so we got down there, and the reality of this one was, this was our last location of the workshop, and we had absolutely no idea, what we were gonna, what kind of elements were gonna get thrown at us. And we got down there, and no kidding, we were just absolutely both blown away, because right at the last part of the day, that sun just popped down through there and gave us that little bit of sunset, and it created this whole scene. Just to me, just created a incredible mood with the late evening, with the bluish of the water and the rock formation and the elements leading out, and then the cloudy sky with the sun just dropping down through there. And if I remember correctly, Don, I think we only had time to make about 2 30-second exposures, if I remember correctly.
That's about it. Yeah, when that sun dropped out of that fog bank up there, and that is fog, we could see kind of a thin veil above the water, and I kept kind of looking at Ron going, maybe we're going to get lucky. And we told the group, get ready. If that sun can penetrate that thin veil, we're going to get that splash of orange, and there's going to be the color harmony and contrast. And
it just lasted for such a short, brief period of time.
Yeah.
We got back to the hotel and we started the process of images, and we thought, oh my God, you believe that we just got that sunset there at the Matterhorn Rock. And just to emphasize one point of being ready, and it's not on this image, but we were doing the Grand Teton workshop last year, and we went out to the Mormon barns for a sunrise shoot, and it was pretty cloudy that morning, and it didn't look like we were going to get any sort of a decent sunrise on the thing. And so, and again, that Mormon barn thing in the morning it's pretty interesting, because there's like 50 or 60 photographers out there all trying to photograph this barn at sunrise. And so, we were being patient and watching, and then clients whose names will remain anonymous were chirping away like a couple of magpies. And all of a sudden, the light just popped through that cloud on that barn for less than 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds most. And if you weren't ready for that, you missed the whole mood of the picture. And these people did, and they were somewhat disappointed that they weren't able to get it. And this particular image right here, if you weren't ready to shoot, keeping track and paying attention to what you were doing, you were going to miss that sun getting in there, because it just happened so fast. I mean, we thought we were going to get it. We prayed we were going to get it. And we got it. And
Yeah.
it really, I think it would have been it's a pretty nice location without it. But that sun dropping in there it just makes everything so much better. You know, concentrate what you're doing. Think about what you're doing when you're out there. Just because you're shooting a landscape that's not moving doesn't mean that something's not going to move in and enhance the landscape. So I hope that makes sense. Does it, Don?
It makes sense. Truer words were never spoken. Okay. I want to ask Michelle, how are we doing on time? Because we're
a little over, but if you want to kind of get through your last couple of slides, I'm holding
yeah,
on
so
to
maybe
a
we'll
couple of
kind of
questions.
we'll pick it up a little bit. This is up in the subway, Zion National Park. This is quite a hike, guys, if you've ever done this. I went up with a friend of mine. I've been up on this hike three separate times. And you have to actually, if you look at the top of the frame, you have to come through that tube. That is the actual subway. And then you come out kind of into this opening. And you've been hiking probably back and forth across the creek and uphill for 3.5 hours to get here, depending on how many times on this particular day. We had to crisscross that creek and boulders about 17 times to get up in here. I wanted to really accentuate this water. We were kneeling down in the water and at that slick rock. So we had to be very, very careful not to get pushed over the edge with this, and got up really close with my 16 to 35 and put on a 5-stop Mor-Slo. I put on a thin I had, so there was no vignetting issues, and went 90 seconds with it. People always ask me, before I move on to the next slide, this one took a lot of experimentation to really kind of dial it in. Thank goodness for digital, that I could check the back of my LCD. But they say, how come you can't put out a chart that will where you can say 30 seconds you'll get this look, 15 seconds this look. Look at the variables I put down there. The speed of the water is a variable. Your focal length is a variable. Your distance to that moving water is a variable. Your camera's angle to that water is a variable. There's just too many variables that would have to factor in for me to tell you you're going to get this or that look. I can pretty much tell you, after doing this for years, especially if you're shooting like an ocean scene, if you want it frozen, obviously go to like 1/1000th of a second. That's kind of a no-brainer. 1/2000th, really freeze it down if you want to get water droplets. If you want to get kind of a scratchy feel, be in that 1/8 to 1/15th. Now, these are just general with all lenses, 1/8 to 1/15th of an exposure. And if you want to get that smooth, silky feel, then be out like you see Ron and I doing at like 30 seconds, okay? And so my goal was to keep the texture of the water, especially there on the bottom left, and then let your eye drift up so it's kind of that darkish one. I wanted to keep that texture in the water, and I wanted that white, and then the one right smack in front of me. And then everything else, I didn't care how much it moved. And I just had to keep playing with exposures. And my buddy was kneeling right next to me. And so we kind of divided and conquered, and he had his Mor-Slo filters. And we finally hit on an exposure that was going to work to give us, we tend to think a lot alike. And so that's how we came up with the exposure for this shot. Back to Scotland. This is a great place called the Fairy Pools on the Isle of Skye. I can't wait to get back there this October. And this is just like a long river that comes down, but it keeps cascading down, and then it creates pools in between the cascades. So again, I mean, I listed this under doing the math, and I had to kind of hop down onto a rock to get the sweep of the mountains that had snowed the night before, and just put enough fresh snow up on those mountains for us that I had to include that in the background. And I went for 30 seconds with this one, and that took the 5-stop Mor-Slo. And you can see I even got some of the clouds moving up in the background that I really liked. But it was just, I wanted that foreground cascade to be right in your face. and then have the eye drift back to the other cascades and kind of just walk the river until I found something that I thought would work. And of course, we had the group out there, so there were already a couple of photographers down there, and then just jumped down and got the shot. So Ron, we're back to you, the Dragon's Eye.
Okay, this is called the Dragon's Eye. Don and I just were in Norway just recently, and where we did a workshop that was absolutely phenomenal. The landscape there was just fantastic, and I had done some research prior to us going over there, and I was trying to find some locations that we might want to get to, and so then I saw this place called the Dragon's Eye. I said to Don, I said, man, we just got to get to this place. This looks just way too cool. And so we got there in the afternoon or late afternoon, and it was just a lot of photographers there. And quick short story, there was a group that was trying. What you have to do is, like at this location, you got to be really patient because everybody is trying to shoot the Dragon's Eye, and then we were just patiently waiting for our turn to get in there, and there was a group right next to us, and I felt kind of bad for this young lady because her boyfriend knocked the camera over face first, and the lens went into the Dragon's Eye. And
that's it. I changed that to the wind, Ron, but you're right. It was the boyfriend.
It was the boyfriend.
The boyfriend did it.
Knocked over the camera. So again, this was, once they cleaned up the lens glass and cleared out, we were able to get some time with the Dragon's Eye, and you can really come up with some really cool compositions. And if you kind of look around it, I shot horizontal, shot vertical, and again, using the Mor-Slo, it just gave that background, that water just rushing through there. It just gave it a really, really great feel. One of the things for me personally is because coming out of the sports background, I never really used filters all that much. Because doing football games and baseball games, there's really no call for them, and I hadn't really done that much landscape or wildlife up to that point. But once I started getting into this landscape with Don and trying to create a mood with some of the images I was doing, these 10 stop and 5 stops, for me at this point, they're just absolutely so essential. I would be lost, absolutely lost on the workshops or the things that we're doing that without them. I mean, they're just, it's just mind-boggling the kind of imagery that you can come up using these filters. Now, I have not gone past the 10 stops, so I can't really say anything about that, but the 10 stop is without a doubt my go-to filter on a lot of these locations. And so so that's the old Dragon's Eye in the Lofoten Islands in Norway, which again, we're going back there, and I'm really looking forward.
We have 4 spots open on that trip. If anybody wants to join us, just come on
And
over
not
to
only-
my website. Yeah.
And not only great locations, but the cinnamon buns are some of the best you're ever going to taste. Okay, this is one I'm kind of dragging on here a little bit. I apologize. This is another one where this was in Scotland, and this was in the late afternoon, and we got to this lighthouse, and boy, this was where weather was just really playing havoc with us. I mean, the wind was really, really blowing, and I walked all around this lighthouse area, and I couldn't find a spot that I really liked, and so finally I kind of got down a little low, and then I was able to come up with this composition. And I desperately wanted to use my Mor-Slo filter, but it was so windy, and out there, what I had to do is, and I didn't have, my backpack was not able to get onto the tripod. So what I ended up having to do is I had to really hold down the tripod as hard as I could to try to make sure that I could get a sharp image. I shot a number of these, and some of them were just unusable because there was motion in there. But I did get a few that were really, really sharp. And again, using that Mor-Slo filter, I mean, what it just does, it just adds another element to your images that you're not going to get if you just, just don't have it on there and you're just shooting at, say, like a 2/50th of a second, freezing the water. It doesn't have the same effect as it does when you're using these 5 and 10 stop filters.
And I wanted to point out real quickly, Ron, because we put this under the heading of weather, that you told me you were using a hotel towel. I think you were out of camera or lens wipes, and you were just going to that. But you told me the minute you would pull it off, you would click the picture before any rain or mist.
Yeah, I mean, I had the towel, and again, that's from the old sports days, because we would take the hotels out of the hotel for a football game, and then we had to use them to, not only keep ourselves a little bit dry, but we had to try to somehow shield the lens from, all the raindrops that were coming on there. And so, again, it's I shot a bunch of frames of this, and a lot of them were unusable because of the weather elements. The rain got on there, the wind was, kind of so windy that it was kind of blowing everything on. But I stuck with it. Was trying to be as patient as I could. I was getting annoyed with myself. I was getting annoyed with the weather, and but finally, I got back, and I had an image that I really liked, and it had a mood. That's one of the things that Don and I try to do a lot of times with words, and I think I've talked about this on some previous images, that when you're out there, try to think about a mood that you're trying to convey with that image. And, again, that goes with what we've been talking about all evening, and that's pre-visualization. Ansel Adams, and believe me, I'm no Ansel Adams, but I loved that word when I first came across it. And I think about it all the time when I'm out there shooting. I try to pre-visualize the picture that's going to pop up on my computer when I download that card. So I know I've kind of beaten that theme to death, but I just feel it's just, and I just feel it's so important. So that's that image from the Scottish Highlands. And I can't wait to get back there because I love that place.
Yeah. Okay. We have 5 more slides to go here. So let's kind of pick it up, Ron, because I know we're over our allocated time.
Okay. Again, I'm not going to go in. This was the lone cypress tree. I was out visiting Don. He was, I think this is when I was taking him on my first trip down to Yosemite. And again, I wanted to create a mood with it, and I used the 10 stop, and I got a little bit lucky with the sun coming out and hitting that the side of the rock formation there. And so that's pretty much how that one came about.
Okay. This is back to the Scottish Highlands. I didn't realize I chose so many from there. This was what we call a preliminary shot before we go out for our sunset. We try to do, a sunrise and then a follow-up shot after that. And then on the other end of the day, we go out and do a pre-shot. So you can see there was some coloring coming already in up on the clouds because our sunset shot wasn't very far from this. My eye went to this red boat on this blue lake. I try to tie elements together. Then off in the distance, and it doesn't really stand out enough for me, but I still like to shot, is that lighthouse that's back there. So it was just experimenting. I put it under the heading of picking the correct ND filter. I didn't know if a 10 stop would work better or a 5 stop. And I think I started with the 10, but I was getting too much motion in the boat. So I dialed it back to a 5 stop, and that just connected the image for me, and it made it work. And it was, I think a lot about color harmony too. Anytime I can juxtapose warm and cool colors together, I'm all over that. And you have a lot of opportunities for that in landscape photography. This is one I just did recently, actually. This is an arch that's located about 1.5 miles from the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. I don't know how big a national story this is, but certainly for us here in California, this plant is supposed to be completely decommissioned by 2025. They're going to take the first reactor offline in 24 and the second reactor goes offline in 25. Well, in rides Governor Gavin Newsom at the last minute trying to save it now because the alternative energy sources that were supposed to be up and online never really happened. So now they're trying to do a last minute save of the power plant. I don't know how I feel about it because my goal is to get that whole area out there open because it's just wonderful, these rock formations that are out there. Sea stacks, caves, arches, everything. So this was a windy day. And because of my close proximity to the power plant, I had to be off this trail by 4 in the afternoon. And I think I captured this in the spring. So this was another one. This was a very, very windy day. And if you see the foreground foliage, it's nice and sharp. So the only way I could do this using a 10-stop Mor-Slo and not having that foliage is to go ahead and shoot 2 frames and then mask them together in Photoshop. And that's what I did on this one. And I think, yeah, this next one up is going up the Big Sur coast north of me. This is about a half-hour drive north up the coast from where I live. And the same thing, situation was close to sunset. You see the sky lighting up back there. And I had foliage, but all that foliage was blowing around in the foreground. And when I took the picture, the water was static. And I said, I need movement. So how do I go about doing that? Well, I shot one where everything was static so I could freeze the foreground down. Then I shot another one where I got the motion in the water. And then through some advanced masking in Photoshop, that would be too difficult to get into here, the techniques. I think I actually put a YouTube video up on my site if you're interested in how I put this image together. But that is actually masking in the ocean with the movement created by the 5-stop Mor-Slo. So again, it's what you want, conceptualizing it, and then if you have the processing skills, how to go about pulling that off. And I think we're going to wrap up with a couple of Ron's pictures and we'll be done.
This was one from the Big Sur workshop. This was a, I think we did this on the morning that we just went around and scouted the locations, and the light just worked out perfectly. We're kind of got the side light. And again, using the 5-stop, it got the motion in the water and just a little bit of the cloud formation, just the clouds moving just a little bit. And, you know, I thought the whole composition came together pretty well. And so, yeah, and again, it's just, you know, being aware of your surroundings. You know, a lot of photography is just, you know, looking and looking and looking until you know, spot something that really catches your eye, and then you can see it compositionally. And so then you go ahead and execute, you know, what your ideas of your vision for that location. So, and again, just
I'm sorry,
working with
Ron,
the elements.
yeah, I think I jumped too quickly on you.
That's okay, no worries.
Okay,
We're good.
let's go back to Norway here.
Okay, here we go. Now, this is one where the elements are right there in front of you. This is an opportunity to make a great picture, and you don't have to actually think about it too much, to tell you the truth, because this thing is just, I had seen so many images of this particular Hamnøy fishing village. I just couldn't wait to get there. When we got there, we shot it, I think 2 times. We shot a morning and afternoon shoot, and it just
And
was,
we're up on a bridge, so
we're on a bridge. We're on a bridge,
and we're shooting. Yeah,
and we're kind of shooting down on it. And again, I just the composition was right there in front of me. This was an opportunity that I didn't have to think about too much. And again, this was a situation where we went back there in the afternoon for the sunset shoot, and I think we were expecting something completely different. I was expecting these kind of cabins to be aglow and the thing, and then it just didn't work out that way. So you just had to switch gears a little bit, but ultimately it worked out really, really well, because we just got some nice sideline that was just kind of tiptoeing across, you know, the mountaintops, and then with the red fishing villages. And then again, because I'm so in love with these filters, I just had to put on the 5-stop and put a little motion in that water. But again, we have some spots open if you'd like to come there with us. This is an incredible workshop.
Yeah. And I think, Michelle, that's it. If you have any questions or the audience has any questions for us, we'd be happy to
Yes,
answer.
I've been holding on to a few.
Okay.
I guess this is for both of you. If you could have only one Mor-Slo in your bag, which would it be?
Ooh, I know what Ron's gonna say. Go ahead, Ron.
The 10 stop for me. I don't leave home without it.
I honestly, oh my gosh, that's a hard question. I think I would, if I could only have one, I would have to say the 10 stop also, but I love the 5 stop. I probably find myself reaching for the 5 stop a little bit more. I don't know why, maybe a comfort thing. I can't explain why, or just the scenes I use it for. But yeah, if you're gonna go buy the first one, maybe go to the 10 and then save up real quick and get that 5.
Don, you didn't
And
answer the
use-
question.
You know, another thing, guys, because you're gonna have all these different filters, so use step down rings too. And you can buy a larger one, and then using a step down ring, you can modify it to fit your smaller glass.
Yeah. And then have you guys tried the very ND?
Yes, I don't know, Ron, have you tried
No, I
that?
have not. I've not tried that yet.
I
The
use
very
it. I
ND,
haven't.
it's a filter that you can twist and it changes the stops as you twist it. So it's kind of like having
Yeah.
multiple filters.
Yeah, and what I like about it, the one I own, they added a polarizer to it, so I do use it. But I don't know why I just find myself gravitating back to the 5 and the 10 stops, and I don't worry about the polarization as much. You know, and it does give me a range of 2 to 8 stops. That it's pretty cool, but I don't know. You know, you fall in love with, it's like you fall in love with certain equipment in photography. And I've fallen in love with the 5 and the 10 stop Mor-Slos right now.
I think what it does, you know what it is? It's a comfort level. You know, after I got involved with using these 5 and 10 stop filters, it becomes a comfort level, because once you have used these often enough, you kind of know what the result's going to be. I wouldn't want to go to a location and start, you know, sometimes messing around with a filter that I've never used before and not have my 10 stop, you know, in my pocket, so I could go right to something that I feel real comfortable. So I think I'm going to give that. I have one of those. I'm going to give it a try, but I always go back to the that 10 stop. I just will not leave anywhere without that filter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
can
and I
you
think-
use polarization and an ND filter in the same manner as a Mor-Slo filter with the lowest ISO?
Don, that's for you.
Oh, wait, say that again, Michelle.
Can you use polarization and an ND filter in the same manner as Mor-Slo filter with lowest ISO?
Okay, well, ISO wouldn't have anything to do. I'm a little confused on the question, because are they asking in regards to using a Mor-Slo? I mean, excuse me, the variable ND with the polarizer built in? Because I wouldn't recommend stacking, I wouldn't recommend screwing in a Mor-Slo and then screwing in a polarizer filter over the top of that. You know, I've never tried it that way. But one of the things that I think we all talked about this a little earlier this afternoon, you start screwing 2 filters together, more times than not, you're going to get those filters stuck together. And then it's a heck of a process to unstick them. And I've seen filters get damaged trying to take 2 filters that were screwed together. Every once in a while on a workshop, we'll start out and we'll get a newbie who will have like an ultraviolet filter, and then they'll screw in their polarizer over the top. And then we have to go and try to get them unattached and tell them you don't stack those filters. So I'm not quite sure if they could, they're still there and could repost the question as if they're talking about a variable ND. But as far as the ISO range, it should have no effect at all, because it's just polarizing the light, and it's polarizing the stray lights that you know, like on this scene here, you're seeing that nice warm sunshine hitting the right of that rock there. And it would polarize down like the glare on the water, stuff like that. But I would heavily advise against stacking a polarizer onto a Mor-Slo. Now that's just me. Maybe another professional would tell you, oh, I do it all the time. But I'd just be too concerned about getting those two filters stuck together.
We have a lot of photographers actually that keep the UV filter on there, and then they'll add other filters on top. One of the things I can say is that the rings on the Stingray filter are made of a different type of metal. There's certain types of metal that want to stick together, and the rings on the Stingray filters have a different type of metal, so they don't get stuck.
They don't stick. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. You've taught me something there.
See, now,
Yeah.
do you look at how fast the clouds are moving to roughly guess how long to make your exposure? Any tips?
Well, you know, that's tough because that just comes back to dealing with experience. But if I can see or I can feel the wind, I will know that the clouds are moving. Sometimes, you know, they're moving where your eye can't see it that much, but when you put on like a 30-second, 1-minute exposure, they will move. About 10 years ago, I taught this lesson to myself because I always thought with fog, because there wasn't a lot of definition in the fog along the coast, especially along the Big Sur coast where I live, I thought that you would just lose all the definition. There wouldn't be anything. And then one day I just said, you know, I'm going to go over, I'm going to try 10, 15, 20 stops on a foggy day, and I'm going to see what I come up with. And I was actually just blown away. So now I don't hesitate to pull out ND filters, or excuse me, Mor-Slo filters on foggy days, even when there looks like there's no texture in it. So yes, but to answer the question directly, it takes a lot of experience and experimentation to actually know what filter to grab for based on the movement of the cloud. I would really have to be probably shooting clouds a couple, 2-3 times a week to really get comfortable with doing that, you know, over a long period of time.
And have either of you done black and white?
Oh, Ron, there you go. That's your question.
That is me. I do a ton of black and white. Again, because of growing up when I was a young cub photographer working in the newspaper business, that's all we did was black and white. And even when I first started at Sports Illustrated, we were still doing our weekly columns in black and white. And so I'm a huge fan about it. And when we're on the workshops, I preach to the students about thinking about taking some of their images and making them black and white. And again, this goes to what we've been talking about. I go into a situation and I can almost immediately tell myself, ooh, this is going to look really cool in black and white. And so then I think in those kind of tones in the image. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of black and white, just a huge fan.
Yeah, he's kind of lit a fire under me. I did black and white. I built a couple of darkrooms. I should say my dad built them for me along the way. But when I got in, especially when I began submitting work for Getty Images, they just weren't that keen unless you were known as a photographer like a Michael Kina, somebody like that, who was a black and white photographer, who is a black and white photographer. And I wasn't known for my black and white. So they kind of dissuaded me from sending black and white in on, and I kind of gravitated away, but now I'm at that age where I shoot to please myself. I really do. I don't really try to shoot to please anybody else.
One of the things we do on the workshops is we've actually gotten a lot of the students to start thinking about black and white, and there's been quite a few of them that have come up to Don and I at the end of the workshop and say, "Wow, thank you for teaching me this, because I never really considered thinking of a scene in black and white." And now, what they're doing is they're expanding their photographic horizons a little bit by now going into a scene and saying, "Wow, you know what? This might look really great just in black and white." Now, this picture of the Hamnoy Lofotens, I probably wouldn't do that in black and white because the red fishing cabins, just, they just add so much in color. So it's just something to, for you photographers to think about when you go into a scene. Sometimes, think about, wow, this might look really cool in black and white. And then, I always try to channel my inner Ansel Adams at what there is of it. But, I love black and white, and I've got Don now starting to think in that direction too, because it's such a great look to some images.
Yeah, I think if I can give you guys one big tip, if you have any type of creative restraints around you, don't build a box around yourself creatively. Be open to anything. Just be open to new ideas, and it's fun. If photography isn't fun, you guys are doing the wrong hobby. I can tell you that. Even where Ron and I have made a career, we've been one of the fortunate two that have been able to make a career, a lifelong career out of this. We still have to keep it fun for ourselves. We can't, and the way I do it is I will, I'll go out and I'll just shoot with infrared cameras, or I'll shoot today and I'm going to convert everything to black and white, or, Ron's great at creating projects and doing projects, which I think is very valuable for you guys. Get a theme, get a project, and make it a personal project, and maybe build a book out of it eventually. And it goes over a number of years that you're working on this project. And they're fun things to do, and they'll energize you, and they'll get you off the couch and get you out shooting on days where you really don't feel like going out.
See, that's one of the great things about photography that I've always loved, is the fact is you can go out there every single day of the week, and I mean every day, regardless of the weather, and you can find something to photograph, something that's gonna generate some interest in you, get the creative juices, flowing. I have just, after doing sports for, I'm not going to date myself here, but, for many, 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 many years, I got tired of beating the same old thing. And then now I'm so energized by, what Don and I are doing. And it just is, it's just opened up a whole new world of photography for me. And I tell you, the great thing about photography, whatever level you're on, is the fact is you can do it indefinitely. There's no, you don't have to be, 25, 30 years old to enjoy what you're doing. You can enjoy this indefinitely, and that's the beauty of it. And you can always come up with something new creatively. So I mean, that's been a big thing for me, is expanding my horizons after all the years of doing pretty much the same thing. And again, Don and I have really done these workshops. We're enjoying them, and I think hopefully at the end of the day, the people are coming away with a little bit of knowledge that we're able to pass on to them, and help them, create some images that, again, that they like. I always say in the workshops that when people are showing us images, sometimes, I can help them, compositionally, with, trying to make an image, but in the end, it doesn't really matter what I think. It doesn't matter what Don thinks. It matters what you think, and what you think of the work that you want to present. And so, if I can pass that on to you guys, I think maybe I've accomplished something tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree with that.
And then
And
for
we're
most
old
of these,
guys.
for most of these images, were they taken in certain months when you find that all the elements come together more than other months?
Well, a lot of these, Michelle, were taken either on scouting trips or during the workshops. So we plan to go to certain locations at certain times of year. And for example, you could go to Lofoten Islands here in Norway at any time of the year and make great pictures. We just wanted to build it around wintertime. So we actually go over in the middle of March, and you could see we had a lot of snow there. In fact, just before we got in, they had I think they told us something like almost 2 weeks steady of snow. They were getting avalanches everywhere. And when we went in, it was just awesome, because we combined this trip with photographing the northern lights at night. And we were putting in a lot of long days because it cleared up through the stretch we went in. And they said these were locals. We have tour guides we hire that go everywhere with us. They said they hadn't remembered a stretch of weather like that for years, where they just said we were so lucky to get the weather we got. Now, we paid the price because we were shooting sunrises, sunsets, and northern lights. But, we missed a little sleep, but we made some great images.
And then a clarification on that earlier question about trying to duplicate the effect of the Mor-Slo. He said he wasn't talking about screwing in a filter, but like a filter holder and then stacking.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I would say, honestly, I don't know. That would be something, you would need to go out and experiment with. I
Okay.
don't know.
We had another
I'll be-
question somewhat similar. Have you ever used a Mor-Slo ND combined with a graduated ND filter?
I don't think I ever have in all the time I've been using NDs. Because a lot of times I'm shooting in kind of, what do I want to say? I'm not shooting, but then I'm looking at a scene like this and you're seeing the peaks are lit. This would be a hard shot to grad down because of the irregularity of the peaks. But most of the time I'm in kind of even light when I'm shooting it. If you remember early on in the show, I showed that one from Bandon Beach where we did have pockets of light popping through. But I wouldn't have graded down the sky on that. So I would think for myself, and Ron, you may be different. I don't recall a time when I've used a grad with a Mor-Slo.
And stacking filters, I don't know, that's just more glass to shoot through. And so I'm kind of a firm believer of, just having one filter on there and operate. I mean, you've got so many variables with all your neutral densities and everything. I'm not sure. And again, I don't, at this point, I'm a real fan of this, the Mor-Slo, so Don can, talk about that more. But I like to use a single filter and that's all.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I mean, I will stack a grad with a polarizer. I do that all the time. But I can't recall a time I've done it with a Mor-Slo.
Yeah, there's no technical reason not to, aside from the fact that the Mor-Slo is blocking a lot of light, and then when you add a grad, you're blocking more. But there may be a situation that calls for that.
Yeah, and it goes back, Michelle, and whoever is asking the question, that we work a lot on the fringes of the day, and the light is happening quick. And so the more you're futzing around, adding more gear, figuring out the exposures, you run the risk of missing the moment. And to me, the moments come very fast in landscape. And, Ron had alluded to, we didn't have a picture of it because it didn't involve a Mor-Slo, but these barns, they're called the Morton Barns out in Grand Teton. We'll be out there in another month doing this. And if the sunlight came and we were trying to call it out, it just was a splash of light. The scene was already beautiful. And then it just intensified the wood, the warmness of the wood on this barn. And it came and went, like Ron said, in about 10 seconds. And people were talking and they missed that subtle moment. But when you go through your images, those frames would jump right off at your eye, because that little extra splash of warmth accentuated the wood. And that's the same thing to me. If you're futzing around out there, stacking filters and trying to do too much, you'll miss the moment. And so I'm more with Ron. I'm usually one filter, but I will stack because all my lenses, I'll say most of my lenses have the Stingray polarizers on them. So I'm not adverse to putting up, and I handhold when I use my grad filters. I don't use a filter holder. I've just always done that. And I have a little trimmer, so it works to my advantage. I don't get a hard line when I'm using a hard filter. And that's just all, it's just what I'm used to doing and how I've always done it.
And then I think our last question of the night, a lot of your photos have a blue tint. Is that natural?
I think it maybe
Or do
Ron,
you
you
just have
do
a
a little
preference for
more.
the cool? Because I have a preference for
Um,
the warm.
You
Yeah.
know what, I didn't notice that they have a blue tint. I mean, one of the things about the blue tint is we're working at early in the morning, a lot of times in the blue hour.
You're in the blue hour. Yeah, there's a lot of blue in the light
And
itself.
so
Yeah.
you know, that's why when we're working at that time of the day, you're going to get that bluish cast. But I didn't notice it on my computer. I mean, I don't know if it's. I honestly can't answer that question because
Yeah, I would have to go back, look at frame to frame to see.
Yeah.
But there is, I mean, you know, yeah, and it does vary from depending on what screen you're watching this presentation on. Ron is very correct. There, you are working in the blue hour, even as the sunrise or the sunset is happening. And a lot of times you can certainly neutralize that in post-processing. I was working on an image just the other day and I went to neutralize some of the blue because I thought it was too much and it just wrecked the feel of the picture. I knew how to neutralize it. It's a simple thing to do, but I went back and reselected the area and I moved the blue back up to where it was originally. And I go, that's what felt right to me. You know, again, these are your images, you guys. And if it's not, you know, it's not a formula. It's art. And if it feels better, a lot of what I connect with in landscape and light and even the elements I choose to put in my scene is a feeling. And if it feels right to me, I always say it's that aha moment, you know? I can't tell you what it's like. I always use this line, I can't tell you what it's like to say you're in love. You'll just know it. I can't tell you when you hear a song why you like it. You'll just know it. Same thing with photography. I can't tell you why you'll like a picture or why you process it a certain way. You'll just know it. And go with your gut. Go with your gut. That's what makes you unique and individual.
That is great advice to end the night. All right. Well, I want to thank both of our speakers, Ron Modra and Don Smith. Thank you so much for your time tonight and your time preparing for tonight.
Thank you.
All right. And we hope everyone will join us next month for our next webinar and have a great evening.